earlier said, it's would like to get feedback. What do you think? How do you think you can use it toolkit to in your own to help improve the work you do in your community?
Okay, great. So
Okay.
as we wait for our participants to share their thoughts, you could actually raise your hand on the Zoom app or just unmute yourself and speak. Or if you may be having any internet challenges, you could share your thoughts in the chat box and I will read it out loud. So yeah, Grace, you could move on.
Okay, the toolkit provides other advocacy toolkits as well as a case studies on how IWAG has provided small grants to youth-led organizations that agencies could use to show the impact and necessity of this work. So this toolkit is something that personally I'm grateful for because it's going to help my work in my community, and it's going to help the work of every sexual reproductive health advocate, their work in their community, in community services and platforms, in creating effective community services and platforms that help the need and help provide the need meet the need, sorry, of adolescents in humanitarian settings. So as we wait for your feedback concerning how you think you can use this toolkit in your setting, in your community, I would like to give the mic to Oko as he takes us on chapter 8.
Okay, thank you very much, Grace. I love the case studies and examples, as you mentioned the in chapter 6 in the toolkit, and hopefully our participants as well could find it very useful in their work. So thank you guys. We're moving on to chapter 8, and chapter 8 looks at manager guidance notes and tools. And so we all can recognize that in our work, there comes a time to manage project or program on reproductive health, especially for young people, or maybe it may also have other components. So this chapter is new compared to the 2012 toolkits. It provides operational guidance and tools for SRH managers to use when planning, implementing, monitoring, documenting their SRH activities. And for a lot of young people who may have some challenges in managing their project or SRH projects or programs, this component actually guides you throughout the process. It maps out the different roles and guidance tools that you need. So we'll go through each of them. So the chapter has 4 main components. The different roles that SRH managers assume during an emergency, staff recruitment, support, and responsibilities. Then it has a chapter on resource mobilization and program implementation. Now, it is also important to note that whereas you may assume some role as an SRH manager during in a regular time, there may be some slightly differences or specific needs in an emergency. So this chapter takes you through this and maps it out for you to make it easy through by managing an SRH project or program in an emergency. Next slide. Okay, so we'll move on into the chapters specifically in the next. Okay, good. So quickly on the chapters, I'll expand more on those. So for chapter 8, looking at specifically on the roles and responsibilities of SRH managers, it provides description on the many roles SRH managers assume using a visual of different hats that they wear when serving on humanitarian responses. So in addition to just expanding on the different roles that SRH managers assume during an emergency, the toolkit has simplified this by presenting a visual presentation of the different responsibilities or the different hats that an SRH manager assumes. So right from the onset, it gives you a visual representation of the kind of responsibilities you assume into in an emergency. That way, it gives you an overview of the kind of support you will need, the kind of skills that you have, and how you're going to leverage on it in the different responsibilities. So on staff recruitment, support, and responsibilities, it describes the key responsibilities of an SRH manager when hiring and managing staff, including recruitment, onboarding, training, example, child safeguarding, and supportive supervision and monitoring. Now, this is very important because in our work as SRH advocates or managers of different projects, you realize that usually in an emergency setting, um, it is not like emergencies are not planned for. That is why they are emergencies. So usually when they happen, you find a lot of SRH managers trying to find ways to recruit staff, try to do a lot of things at the same time. Now, this toolkit actually comes in handy because it describes the key responsibilities. It provides like a head start for you in an emergency. So you wouldn't have to fumble or struggle to do all of these things yourself because it provides the guidelines by describing the key responsibilities that you have as a manager when you're hiring and managing staff. Also, the process of recruitment, onboarding, training, and including safety support around emergency, as well as supervision and monitoring. Because in an emergency, once again, things can get a bit out of hand because it's not planned for. So you are trying to wrap your mind and your hand around a lot of things at the same time. So this component helps you through this process of staff recruitment, support, and your responsibilities. Now, as emergencies are also not planned, resource mobilization, sometimes it becomes a hurdle. Even in regular times, it becomes a struggle for a lot of community-based organizations, youth-led organizations, sometimes even with international organizations, because they have to go back to the drawing board and find ways to raise funds and resources to support an emergency situation. So this toolkit outlines the different steps of resource mobilization, including identifying and networking with donors, exploring funding opportunities, engaging SRH and ASRH stakeholders, and contributing to proposal writing and budget development. The section also provides two templates for proposals and budgets, including sample budget and corresponding budget notes. This is amazing in that, whereas time may be limited and all of that, the toolkit has provided all these guidelines to make sure that it helps managers navigate through resource mobilization easy. Because once you have these guidelines, you are one step ahead in using it to develop your budget needs, your proposal needs. And then, I mean, the bit about networking is also very important because that is where donors and other stakeholders get intimate with you to know your work and how it impacts your communities. So the part on resource mobilization encompasses all of these things to guide you through mobilizing resources. Now, I move on to program implementation, which is also very important. Now, the toolkit on program implementation, this chapter, it emphasizes the importance of leadership and the type of management and supervision you provide to staff. The section also describes what an action plan is, how to use it as a manager, and provides an action plan template you can use and adapt for your programming. Now, it is also very important to note that we may have the passion, the resources, and everything as a manager, but without the right kind of leadership to manage staff and type of management to staff, you may, like the outcomes you intended to achieve with your project may not be achieved in the end. So it is very, very important as a manager and through program implementation that the toolkit provides like an emphasis on the guidance for the importance of leadership and the type of management, so that at the end of your project, you will arrive at the outcomes that or the vision that you wanted to achieve in the beginning to begin with. Now, let's explore some of the ways that this chapter can help us in our organization. For instance, the use of proposal templates would also help a lot of us, and those of us who work in humanitarian settings and you've been working in the field of sexual and reproductive health can share your experiences as well. How it will help you in using proposal template to advocate for more ASRH funding, including the specific context of your communities and why the funding is needed for the desired impact that you need. So throughout the year, I also like to emphasize that the use of the onboarding and job description templates to hire staff that are dedicated to ASRH activities. That is one of the key things that this chapter can help us do. So, for instance, you have the vision or your overall goal and all of that, and you also know the key competencies you need to hire as a staff to manage the project. Now, these templates on onboarding and hiring guides you through the specific roles and responsibilities and the key competencies you need from someone that you need to onboard in the project. So it guides you through the process, and it helps you hire the right people to help you deliver a good project for a great impact in your community. Now, throughout the year, youth-led organizations and young people expressed the need for more operational guidance and support that was tailored to their needs. Much of the guidance for SRH is geared towards larger organizations. Now, how can we use this chapter from the toolkit to help community-based and youth-led organizations implementing ASRH programs? I would love to hear from our participants on, I would love to hear your views on this as well. But whereas I wait to hear from you, I would like to share this key outcome. So for instance, in the youth webinar series, we talked about co-developing a companion guide to the toolkit for youth-led and community-based organizations. So where the guidance is modified to the realities of local organizations with different staffing and resource levels compared to those of UN agencies and international NGOs. So for instance, this toolkit has also, like, it's being adapted to, it's being modified to the realities of local NGOs, because of course, we realize that largely these things relate to larger organizations. So a lot of youth-led organizations and community-based organizations kind of struggle because it does not reflect their realities. But with a lot of the discussions we've had, this guidance has been modified to suit young people in the grassroots, in humanitarian settings, in different communities who may be struggling. So they can also adapt, use the guidance, the toolkit to, achieve better results in terms of funding and managing their projects. So briefly, I would love to hear from our participants, and you may you may type your views out in the chat box, or you could just raise your hand or just unmute, and then we'll also allow you to speak. How can chapter 8 and even chapter 6 help you and your organization in your communities overcome some of the challenges that you may be currently facing, especially in humanitarian settings? How can these chapters in the tool help you overcome these challenges? Kindly share your thoughts with us, and it will be amazing just for us to document these feedback to also share in the main group when we close this breakout session. Thank you very much. Okay, so yes, I'm still waiting to hear from someone, from one of our amazing participants. We have about 10 minutes to go. So it would be nice to hear some of your feedback, and then I can share with the larger group of all the amazing things that we get to hear from you share with us. Okay, I can see John Patrick is connecting to audio, and I'm hoping to hear from him shortly. Okay, thank you very much. Can we hear from any participant? Okay, good. I have someone raise their hand. Okay, so Karina's hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just have actually a question to the audience. Has anybody tried to do resource mobilization or been involved in program implementation where young people have been part of the leadership or been guiding the implementation? Do we have anybody from the audience that would be willing to share their experiences doing programming and resource mobilization? Over.
Okay, thank you, Karina. So, okay, good. There is a comment from Nabrisa again, and she shares a very important comment. And if you don't mind, I could read it out loud. Okay, sorry, I was muted for a second. So Nabrisa says, I suspect there's silence because we haven't had a chance to look through it all yet. But it sounds like this will be an excellent resource to help with advocacy, integration of adolescent SRHR in, in preparedness activities, and to highlight the importance of meaningful participation to donors. Great, great submission there. And of course, I agree. And I can also relate. So for those of us who might not have gone through the toolkit in all, just through these discussions and explanations that we've been through, what are your general thoughts? And Karina asked an important question. I'd love to hear a few more people even share some thoughts with us. But of course, I definitely agree with Nabrisa on this one. So we still have a few minutes to go. So we can share a few thoughts and then just before we wrap up briefly. Thank you. I'd love to hear from Sawa. I don't know if he's still online. Okay, it looks like he dropped due to internet challenges. Okay. So, Grace, do you have any few thoughts to share briefly before we wrap up?
Okay, thank you so much, Oko. Thank you so much. Um, yes, for a beautiful review on the manager's guidance notes and tools. I think from the question Karina asked whether any of the participants has been involved in fundraising or resource mobilization for a as a adolescent sexual reproductive health project. I think I have been, and one of the when I think two years ago, one of the issues I encountered was I was not able to. I just got into the sexual reproductive health space, and I wasn't able to come up with a very good proposal. But with this toolkit, it's a great resource. It's something that I could easily just somebody that is just coming into the sexual reproductive health space and want to advocate or implement projects and programs can take them, go through the toolkit, and it makes work easy. It makes work more effective. It makes advocacy for adolescents sexual reproductive health a beautiful thing. It makes the work more effective, really, and that's one thing I'm grateful for. And I'm certain when everybody in this breakout group goes through the toolkit, you'd see the beautiful things you can do with it and the opportunities it provides for you and for those in humanitarian settings. So thank you so much,
Okay,
Oko. I think
thank you, Grace. And I mean, I can relate because I remember when I was, I'm no longer a teenager, but I joined the SRH space when I was a teenager, and I like if I had a toolkit like this in hand at the time, it would have really helped me. Nonetheless, the lessons through the challenges that I experienced in those times also helps to be in this kind of position to understand the challenges in the communities and how these toolkits can help our colleagues in different communities. So briefly, we can then proceed to wrapping up. As we wrap up, feel free if you have any comments to share, kindly let us know. You can raise your hand or type in the comments in the chat box, or just unmute and we could let you speak. We have just a minute. So final thoughts. Um, it's been amazing, hosting this breakout section, and I'll provide a brief summary in the main group, but just to have a quick take on the summary. So, for instance, in this brief period that we've had this interaction, we've learned that the voices of adolescents are unheard. Their participations in decision making is also reduced or limited due to the loss in communication channels, and also the high incidence of or risk of abuse and violence in humanitarian settings. It is also important to note that adolescents during these times are invisible as a group, as because they are often integrated within other groups and not specifically recognized as adolescents. And we also learned that this, in particular, will limit attention being given to their needs or specific needs that they will need in the type of in a humanitarian setting. So we also learned that, especially from Nabrisa. She says that the toolkit will be an excellent resource to help with advocacy integration of adolescents in SRH preparedness activities and to highlight the importance of meaningful participation through donors. So thank you very much. It's been amazing with you all. It's time to leave the breakout session now. A pop-up would appear on your screen, and when you're ready to leave, you could just click on the blue button that says leave breakout room, and we'll all meet in the main room, and I'll share the summary with everyone there. Thank you so much. For myself, Grace, and Karina, who has been supporting us through. So thank you very much. Let's move to the main room now.